Thanks for joining me. I can see a few people are having some trouble with your connections or getting my feed back down to you. I decided not to use my camera so that I wouldn't clog up your signal feed with my crazy camera feed, but I thought I would just pop it on really quick, then wave at you and say good morning or good afternoon, wherever you might be. And I see everybody's video quality dropped dramatically, so I'm going to just turn my camera right back off, and poof, everybody's feed quality goes right back up. So there we go. I'll try to keep it light and easy on that front. But I'm your host, Andy Braden, nerd guy. I didn't put my suspenders on this morning, but I do have them. So that's me. I'm going to do a really sort of high-level overview of what H5p is all about and how it works inside of Moodle. Take a look at some of the administrative behaviors and features in the system so that we have a kind of good platform for thinking about how, as an admin, I need to manage some of this H5p stuff. And then we'll dive into building and using it inside of courses to create interactive elements within the space. And we'll wind up doing a couple of kind of thought experiment style points during the session where we think about how we would do things or even quickly mock up things on your own sandbox site. And then we've got some assignments that we'll do in between this session and next week's session, where we'll dive into some more features and functions and tools inside the toolkit. There's a forum in the class. You can jump in and introduce yourself, but also feel free to use that for questions. When we're not in the session, you can jump in and ask questions, and someone will answer you, maybe even me. But honestly, if you see a question and you know the answer, jump in there too, because I'm not actually the source of all the special knowledge. I just happen to talk an awful lot. That's really what it's all about. So let's just get things kicked off here. Today's focus, H5p, what it's all about, why you might use it, what benefits it brings, all that sort of stuff. And we're going to focus today on some of the content types. Our focus today is really going to be on the kind of simple content types that you can bridge up into the more complex types, and we'll focus on those more complex ones in next week's session. But we'll get through a lot of material today. Don't worry. Sort of maybe taking a step back, but in my mind, it's really kind of the building blocks of it all. Right? You start with the foundations, and the foundations really is why even use stuff like this? What's the point? And I feel like, you know, we all probably have opinions about it, hopefully, or we think we have opinions, but we haven't really formulated them, is maybe even more the case. But fundamentally, there are a couple of big ticket reasons to think about using interactive content and promoting the use of interactive content in your learning environments. One of my primary drivers around it is really coming from universal design for learning approaches to building content is something that we tend to think about from an accessibility perspective, but it's also accessibility in the broader sense, making content more available and accessible to all users, rather than thinking about it in terms of, you know, special accommodations for edge cases or something like that. It's changes the conversation to think about how building content that serves all the audience also happens to provide that edge case support. And so one of the things that I think about with interactive content is how I can take content that is presented in a more traditional way and provide an alternative approach to learning that same content. one of the projects that I worked on years back in Blackboard was with the data science team, and they had run analytics on uh, student interactions within systems that they had data access to. They depersonalized and de-identified everything and purged out, frankly, an awful lot of data sets that were essentially, that's a course that has 2 files in it, and nothing else, and threw all that stuff out and got it down to courses with interactive elements. And the only data set that we got initially was that you could completely correlate the frequency with which the student looked at their grades with what their grade outcome was going to be. When they looked at their grades a lot, they had a high grade. If they didn't ever look at their grades, they had a low grade. If they were in the middle, they had a grade in the middle. And that was a perfect correlation set. So my desire to know what my grade was directly correlated with how high my grade outcome wound up being. Um, not really terribly useful for teaching and learning, but that was the only thing we got. And then as we dug deeper into it, we found more data, and we talked about these ideas, and I presented on it a couple of times. And one of the other elements that came up was students also had a correlation with the amount of time they spent in the course content. And the higher they spent had a bell curve to it. So as they approached the normal or the average amount of time, they had the highest success outcomes. And when they exceeded the average time, they had lower grade outcomes. And that was, in our estimation at least, probably that they were just looking at the same content over and over again and not getting more successful with that content. Reading the same paragraph multiple times doesn't make it make more sense. It just means you've been looking at it for longer. And that was our guess as to what was going on with that data set, something along those lines. Students who got what they needed from the content, got what they needed and moved on. Students who didn't get what they needed from the content only had that one version of the content, couldn't really get past that one version of the content, and didn't really ever advance them. And that ties back to this idea of universal design for learning, is that by providing multiple modes of engaging in that content, multiple avenues of viewing that material, and consuming the information through different modes, encourages and increases student outcomes, because it gives them an opportunity to meet the material on their level rather than having to figure out how to meet the material on its level. So that's one of my super long and complicated pitches for why I think interactive content has value, and it's more than just a toy. It provides an opportunity to redesign content in a way that learners who might not be able to get what they need from the original version of the content have an opportunity to try a different approach and get to the same result. Now, there are other reasons to think about interactive content. One of the big ones that I think from the student's perspective is it just feels more modern, right? And they're always complaining about how things aren't spiffy enough or TikTok enough or whatever the hot thing du jour is enough. And it does provide an opportunity to create content and experience points within the system that feel different, more challenging, more interesting to the learners. It also gives you an opportunity to redesign content completely, right? You're building it fresh, you're building it in a medium, gives you an opportunity to rethink the material and whether or not you can improve on that material. We all get into that trap where, I always think of the old ditto machine, and you just, each term you crank out a new set of dittos. And while that's easy and convenient, it doesn't necessarily lead to the best outcomes, right? Because maybe there's something I can improve or enhance in that material. And designing the content fresh for interactive content experiences gives you that opportunity to reassess and reevaluate. That was a lot of talk. but I feel like that's got some value. And it's really, the punchline is, it's not just about making things fun or punchy or gamey. Those are beneficial and they have benefits, but there's actually deeper currents underneath it that give us an opportunity to really try to improve and enhance the learning experience for our learners. H5p in itself is a open source tool. It's a group out of Norway, h5p.org, that is open source. They built it, they shared it. It's HTML5 based content. That's the H5 is HTML5 presentation. And it is by nature then also mobile ready. It's a tool that's designed to be able to be used in a modern web environment. It's designed to be used on mobile devices. It works on your mobile device interactions. It works in your web page interactions. It's more or less responsive, and a decent job of enhancing the accessibility of the tools over the years. So they've been more and more scaffolding inside the tool for accessibility options, alternative text, captioning, all that sort of stuff. It's free for you to use, but there's kind of a bit of a catch to that to some degree, and they're changing their model a little bit so that it's still free to use, but they want to encourage you to use it in ways that you can pay them so they get something out of it. Right. It's an understandable proposition. Um, but it is, typically, like, the straightforward way to use H5p content is that you go to their site, you create content on the site, and then you embed the content somewhere and use it. That's sort of the WordPress approach to it all. Other LMS platforms more or less take the same approach. There's some LTI style integration options as well as embed options. But you author the content in their system, you host the content in their system, or you download it and upload it somewhere else. And that's kind of the base approach. And that's fine, but that's not really, I don't know, it's not my favorite approach. But what's nice is that in Moodle and in OpenLMS, there's an integration that allows you to just use the tool natively in the platform. So that's one of the things we'll dive into and explore a little more today. One note that I'll put in here about the integrations, there's actually more than one inside of Moodle at this point, is that as the administrator, you have the power to manage what's available in those integrations in a couple of different ways. And so you've got the ability to turn it on and off completely, obviously, but you also have the ability to determine which modules and the plugins are available. There are about 40 different content types that are available inside the system, and so it's a lot of stuff. And we'll get into these, and that's why this takes a while to get through all of this, is that there's a lot to talk about with these different content types. But fundamentally, from the administrative perspective, you have the power to control which types are available. And there are certainly a few of the types that you may decide you don't want to have available for folks to use, and you can turn them off so that they're no longer an option. We'll dive into that a little bit more, but fundamentally, each approach to getting the H5p content into the system gives you granular controls. You can also just open it all up and say, have fun with it. And that works great. So, so don't get me wrong. You don't have to get into this, but if you had some policy, there's a content type that's about recording audio that requires a Chrome extension, and it only works in Chrome with that extension. And it may be the school policy to say, hey, you know what? That's not, I don't want to get into that. So you just turn that one off. Poof, then it's gone. And you don't have to sweat it. teachers can find all kinds of other things that will require students to use Chrome and use Chrome extensions, but but it won't be your H5p set. And so there's an approach inside of the system to manage that. It's all available to you. I think it'll make you feel good. At least it makes me feel good to know it's there. It's also mobile ready. The components are compatible with the mobile app, as well as just the browser experience on a mobile device. So if they're using a browser on the mobile device, everything works hunky-dory. You know, it's all very straightforward. If your students tend to use the mobile app instead, which there are plenty of reasons to use the mobile app in general, the H5p content are compatible with the mobile app experience. You got to obviously enable the mobile app in the first place, and then you want to make sure that there's support for framing inside of the system, and that will allow the H5p content to be able to be framed in the mobile app and work correctly. It sounds complicated. It's actually, I mean, it's just 2 checkboxes essentially inside the admin settings, and that'll make sure that H5p content works in the mobile app for all the students when they come in on that app. But I thought it was worth mentioning, or at least pointing out, that you may have to go in to allow the frame embedding in the security settings. I don't think I don't feel like there's a lot of risk associated with turning that on, and I have typically run with frame embedding all along because it allows faculty to build content that does come in from outside using the framing. It does present, strictly speaking, some security risks. Users could frame in content from somewhere that turns out to be a bad place to have content coming in. Typically, the way that happens is more sort of breaking styles and less maliciousness, because malicious code framed in doesn't really execute the way it needs to be malicious, but it can bring in, say, JavaScript libraries that collide with existing JavaScript libraries and create funky behavior on the page. So I guess that's my word of warning about that one, or my caveat I'll put on that. But overall, it's really straightforward. It's super easy. And then what's great is it all works, whether they're coming in on the web side on their mobile device or if they're coming in through the app, they get the same kind of experience. I've already sort of touched into this a little bit, but let's talk about it a little more in more depth, is the idea of how to build the content itself. There are ways to author H5p content in the system and outside the system. We'll actually take a look at that as well. But fundamentally, there are kind of 2 ways that H5p content works inside the OpenLMS system. It's an activity, which is a graded experience then because it's an activity. You can turn on that plugin and set it up, and then it's a H5p interactive content activity in the menu, and it allows you to author content directly in the platform. And there's also an embed tool that allows you to put H5p content kind of anywhere in the system, and the embed filter that comes along with that tool, so that when it sees that content, it renders it. There's a new H5p Embed Behaviors built into the Addo editor, and that's new as of our last release. So the 3.8 release. Is that 3.8? See, I'm already confused. Yeah, the 3.8 release in July. And that release included sort of a new way to do the embedding, as opposed to just sort of pasting embed links into things. It allows you to do the embed code directly through a widget in the Addo editor. We'll take a look at both of those approaches, and we'll talk about kind of the advantages. From a super high level, the easy stuff to think about is the activity is an activity. So it does grades, puts grades in the grade book, gives you detailed reporting about the student's behavior in the activity. The embed doesn't, right? It's not tracking who's doing what. It's not tracking a unique individual's progress through the activity. It's just creating an activity element that the user can interact with. So each time I go to that page, it doesn't remember that I've already done it. Each time I look at it, it doesn't remember the path that I took last time. And you can get some data about interactions on that, don't get me wrong, but it's not, its intention is not to be a graded activity. So it doesn't behave in that way typically. The kind of stuff that you can see is you can look at detailed data footprints about student clicks and interactions overall. And I suppose you probably could piece together a custom report that pulled enough information that you could figure out who was clicking when. Outcomes are not going to really be tracked still, but you can get interaction behavior as far as who is interacting with it and how long they spent clicking on it, that kind of stuff. But that would take, it'd take a little kind of cleverness in reports to build, either with the custom SQL reports or with the tool like IntelliBoard, you'd be able to see some of that behavior as well. Let's talk about the activity behavior. This is the way it's been inside of OpenLMS all along, as an activity. Could embed as well, and that's certainly something that was doable. It kind of took a little bit of effort to embed content because you had to build it somewhere, host it somewhere, and then embed it from that place. And that's where folks would typically go to h5p.org for that. Or now h5p.com for their commercial side. But with the authoring tool inside the platform, it's just an activity that shows up in the adding activities menu. You launch it, you get an interface that allows you to construct the object inside the platform, save it locally, and run it as an activity. You could do that and then take the embed code from that object and embed it in other places inside the system, which is what I used to do sometimes. It's a little hinky and it feels a little weird, and I'm glad we don't have to do that anymore. There are better approaches. Overall, the activity approach gives you, I guess, the benefit of being able to create an activity that is going to give you results back. So it's a touch point where I want to collect the assessment, essentially, right? I'm interested in knowing the outcome of the student interaction with the content. I'm interested in tracking their overall behavior and experience, and I might even be giving them a grade in their final grade based on that interaction set. It's also good for doing completion tracking. So if I'm tracking completions, that would be, or that I want to use completions to trigger some behavior, that would be the way to go at it. Is it as an activity? The embedded content's not really going to give me that same experience because it isn't tracking those things. A note about grades, and particularly around completion tracking, the underpinnings of the engine for H5p is all XAPI, which is the new SCORM standard. And much like most of my experience with SCORM, you know, most of the time it's great. Sometimes it has some weird issues, and sometimes those issues are weird enough that I can't really even understand why it's not working the way I think it should. The upside with the H5p content is it's easy for me to just start all over again and build it one more time, and most of the time that resolves whatever weird issue that I felt like it was having. However, if the activity offers a summary page at the end of the activity experience, almost always that thing is the required trigger to be able to flag something as completed. So if there is a summary page and I choose to not use it, I find that it almost always doesn't track completion the way I'm expecting it to track. But if I turn on the summary page, poof, completion works. Um, I don't know for sure that it's actually required that way. That's just been my experience, and so I'll share that little insight on that piece. Most of the time, if somebody says to me, I'm not getting grades out of it the way I think I'm supposed to, or it's not tracking completion when students finish it, my first question will be, did you turn on the summary page? And if the answer is no, I'll say turn on the summary page. Almost always, hey, it works now. So I'll share that with you in advance. You can share that with faculty when they get into building these things. Every once in a while, things just don't thread right on those. Something happens in the session, something glitchy happens with the user's phone. They were like, oh, well, yeah, I was driving down the freeway while I was doing it. And you're like, well, that's probably why it didn't work for you. Don't do that next time. But sometimes things do go squirrely, and just, let support know. We'll track those issues. We can help keep these things moving along. But a lot of times what's best to do then is to just clear the student's attempt and have them try it again. And almost always it'll work that time. So, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there's something really, truly a bug or a glitch in there that comes out. Overall, building the activity is pretty easy and pretty clean. I thought I'd pause here and do a little drive through on that because, I don't know, I'm not really that big on talking through slides anyway. So I'll spare you that part of the experience a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and share, let's see, I'm going to share a tab on my Chrome here. Let's take a look at this course. Haha, there we go. So this is the course for the class that we're doing, the webinar. And I thought I'd just start with talking about this interactive content element and how we build it, right? So in your site, if you've got the H5p activity turned on inside the admin menu, that tool will show up as an activity that can be created there in the tools. And what you get is this kind of construction menu that allows you to build content. You can also upload content objects. So if you've got prepackaged files from somewhere else, you can put them in there. One thing that I'll recommend for folks is, especially with these complicated tools like the interactive videos or say a timeline, which actually, here, let me switch to alphabetical view. There's the timeline. If I look at the details of any of these, there's actually a pretty good description along with some screenshots for all of these. And then there's also typically a link to a demo or even a tutorial on the content. So it gives you a lot of options for viewing all that stuff. Oh yeah, you know what? Let's take a look at that too, Aaron. Absolutely. Thanks for reminding me. So the content demo, if we click on that, and I think, just gonna double check, I'm not sharing this tab. So, so you won't see what I'm doing there. But cleverness of my own tab sharing. But if you click on that demo, it takes you to the h5p.org site. You can see a demonstration of the content, and in that demonstration, the content is a reuse tag in the content, and you can download that package and upload it into the system to use it as a starting point. And that's, for me, it's so much easier to get in there and build that kind of content, like a timeline, which pretty complex object, by starting with starting point. So I take that starting point, which is the example they have on the website, download it, upload it into here, and then change all the settings to be the thing I want it to be. And so rather than be about strawberries, it can be about blueberries because I don't like strawberries. I don't know, whatever. But that starting point is a real nice shortcut. especially for these complex tools. But it also gives you a way to investigate the way the packages are built, right? So it's a nice way to learn by example or taking a look at those features. If you didn't catch it here, by the way, too, when you look at this content building tool here, it always will start with popular first, which is handy when I'm coming in to build content, because almost always I'm building one of these things at the top of the pile. However, it doesn't always do me a really good bit, because then I got to come in and search, and you'll notice obviously it's not alphabetical. You can just click on this tab over here to resort by alphabet, right? So you say, I don't want newest or most popular. I want to see just alphabetical layout. And then you can browse all the content that way. It works pretty nice. There is a search tool in here as well, that you can narrow down the results really quickly. So if you're super lazy like me, this is one of your favorite things to do, like me. This type of head filter is really pretty awesome and good. I'm an administrator, so I get some of these functions that show up in here. Your faculty, they don't get this kind of a choice to be able to upload or download or manage packages. Typically, you do this through the admin interface, but since I'm an administrator and I'm looking at the H5p interface, I actually have the ability to, say, grab and install packages that aren't installed on the server currently. This is for the activity type. It's not currently installed in the activity type. But there's also the embed approach, and it has its own packages. Just to be aware of all those cool things. But if I wanted to update, say, find the hotspot in here, I can come in and update it through this interface rather than going to the administrative interface. But since we're talking about that admin interface, and we even had a question about that admin interface, let's jump over there. Let's take a look at that. So in the site administration panel, you will notice conspicuously there's this H5p setting that's in here. This is new with the last release, the 3.8 release. But I'm not going there right now, because I'm going to go to the activity module, which is the other plugin that you have in here. And there's an H5p in there. Just to be confusing, there are two different ways to do this. So this activity that we were just looking at is managed by the activity version of the product. Oh, thanks, chatbot. However, this is the settings for the activity type and the activity interaction directly. So I can manage the statistics and the kind of behavior over here of everything. I can control what the default options are when content's built. I want to make sure that we do use yeah. So the hub behavior, that's up to you whether you turn it on or off. The default settings from H5p are that obviously they want to collect statistics about you and how you use the tool. You may decide quite appropriately that that's not what you want, because you don't want to share data. And so you can turn that off. And this is where you would manage that, just to be super clear. And then the libraries are managed in this other set of settings in the same space. And I can update content cache in there, and I can also manage updates through this interface, right? So that library needs an update. I can update it. And that's gonna run, do some thinking, check it out. See, you get some live interactions. There we go. It's all done. And so it went through and updated the instances that content's in use in as well. This is also where I would manage whether or not certain activity types were restricted, so I could maybe turn off content types that I wasn't interested in supporting on our campus. For whatever reason, you decide you want to turn those off on. It's pretty simple to manage that availability of stuff. There are lots of, so this site is a bit on the older side, so there's lots of iterations of tools that in fact maybe don't even exist anymore or are dependent packages of existing tools. So you can see there's been drag and drop has had multiple generations of development where the name has finally settled into something slightly different, text as well, and so on. But yeah, it's really easy to get that turned on through a support ticket if it's not in there already. If if your site is on the newer side, it came turned on or it came available but not enabled. If your site's before H5p came out as a tool, which probably like 4 or 5 years ago, somewhere in that window, it may not be on at all, and you might just have to have support come in and kick it on for you, and then it'll become available and you can use it. So fundamentally, I can manage the libraries that are available. I can manage the behavior about updating and some of the other interactions in here, and I can manage the overall behavior and settings for the tool, right? So like we were saying, what kind of data it shares with h5p.org, save state, right? So is it automatically saving the state for the user when they're interacting with content? If you've got people that are planning on building long modules mirroring what I tend to think of as SCORM packages, where there's a long package of content that a user plays through, save states are really good. If you think everybody's interactions are going to be pretty short and sweet, save states are not really necessary, and it just puts a bunch of overhead on the database that you don't need to put on there. It's up to you. And choose what makes sense, and you can fiddle with the save state frequency. If you think that it's causing problems, but you need it, let us know and we can try to help figure out how to tune it better. If you've got it turned on and you want to look at the load impact on the site, you can turn on in the site administration settings, down in the development space, there's a debugging window in there. And in the debugging window, you can turn on performance data that will turn on performance stats for the interactions between the web server and the database server and the file server cache systems. And you can see transaction data about how long it's taking to build the page, how many transactions you're doing against each of the different elements within the system, and it'll give you some insight into where things are slowing down potentially, and that might be worth doing if you wanted to turn on the save state and you wanted to figure out what kind of impact the save state was having on the site. So there you go. That's some super nerdy database administration rabbit hole that we just went down. Sorry about that, but hopefully that was useful for you. So anyway, that's one approach to managing all this stuff is building content as an activity. Those activities show up as activities in the course. They're really pretty straightforward. And like I said, you can build the content directly in the system this way. So you can, well, let's choose something short and simple instead of complicated. Like we could do a fill in the blanks activity, right? So instructions that show up that gives you a tip about how to do things. Blanks are added with an asterisk with a correct word or phrase after the asterisk. If there are multiple options, use a slash between them. You can add a tip by putting a colon and then the tip, right? So here's an example. H5p content may be edited using a blank, and it says looking for browser, will accept web browser, and then the tip is colon, something you use every day. So you could just quickly build one of these. Let me just say art. It's really, I mean, it's a bit of a cheesy example, but it's about as simple as that. To build some of this content, of course, it helps when you can both fill out all the fields and spell correctly. But now there's an interactive element that's in the course. Once this finally gets around to saving. Oh, look at that. The filter didn't work. Haha. Sometimes the first time you use one of these, it takes it a bit for the filter to figure out what it's doing. Or maybe I made a syntax error. Let's take a look. What did I do wrong? Asterisk in front of the correct word. Slash if you have multiples. Colon to do that. So seems like it should be working, but perhaps it is the filter today. Let's just try that one more time.
You need an asterisk before and after. You only have one before.
Thank you. I was just noticing that too. I was like, wait a minute, I forgot my ending. So good catch. Thank you. And my close asterisk. So good catch. And right, filters almost always need closing filter tags. So duh. So there we go. There's the blank. It's looking for an answer. There's my informational pop-up. And then I can just put smart. And then if you wanted to add alternatives like smarter, smart est, whatever, you can put those in with the backslash. It's simple, but right, this is an activity now. So this is a checkpoint assessment. It's not collecting a grade because I didn't set it up to collect a grade, but it could. But it's definitely tracking user interactions and tracking user behavior in here. And I can look at reports around that behavior. So this is truly building activities, right? It's just a straight activity inside the system. Here it sits with its own little activity block on the page, and away you go. Yeah, so you know what I will say, Aaron, is that you're going to want to switch to the Atto editor anyway, because Tiny MCE has not been developed and has been deprecated. It has not been developed against in Moodle and has been deprecated by the Moodle team. And so yeah, who knew? There actually will be some issues that you should be seeing with the Tiny MCE editor around embedded images. So if you're using the editor to put images inside of things like labels or page resources, Tiny MCE uses the wrong file handler behavior. So when you copy those objects, they break every time. So there's a problem there. But if you want to get into some of the Atto formatting stuff, let's circle around on that so that we can take a look at them, because it should be much better than it had been in the past with Atto and formatting. And there are some good ways to be able to tune that formatting behavior in Atto to make it better. But you're right. I've seen some squirrely stuff with the sort of WYSIWYG on it. but not so much lately. I guess is what I'll generously say. Yeah, so there you go. The Atto editor is, yeah, I was going to say a lot of folks, the thing that they loved about Tiny was that it gives them more flexibility around controlling style and format. There are some optional plugins that we can look at to give you a little bit more of an extension in that, but most of them are very intentional because they're trying to um, reduce the ways in which faculty can create non-accessible content in their course. Like, I found this cool fuchsia color to make a background and then put orange text on top of it. Like, there's a special place in Dante's Inferno for you, my friend, but thank you for doing that. So, but there are actually some good tools, and there's some additional color tools that are available, for example, that allow you to put color in there, but it also allows the administrator to create a fixed list of choices for color for fonts rather than letting people just pick any random thing. Yeah, so Miles, you can turn off the recording tools and then you don't have to worry about this impact on the record tools. And that's, I will encourage that approach. So actually, let's take a quick look at that as a sidebar. Since we're talking about the Atto editor, we're getting ahead of ourselves ever so slightly because we're going to get into the Atto editor next, but it's a good place to go. So in the text editor space where I'm managing my editors, I can manage which ones are available and which ones are on and which ones are defaults, but I can also go into the toolbar settings itself. There are all of these different plugins that are available in the toolbar. Not all of them are turned on necessarily. But there's the insert H5p tool that we're going to take a look at in just a minute. And so you can take any of these and put them into or remove them out of the toolbar. So if you wanted to get the record RTC behavior out, because that allows people to record video and audio and save it through the HTML editor, you can remove the button by taking it out of the strings. And poof, now the button's gone. So people don't have access to that tool anymore. It's still enabled on the side. It's still kind of hanging out there somewhere. You just don't have to put it in there anymore. Yeah, it's pretty good and not too bad. So H5p content, if you author it in the site, is stored on the site, but it can be stored elsewhere and embedded into the site, if that makes sense. What we're looking at with authoring that tool is it's actually saving the files locally, which is why we have to install all those libraries locally, so that then those files have local copies of the libraries to run on. Yeah. Hopefully that makes sense. But that's one of the reasons why I really like the Moodle integration in the activity for the H5p content, is that I don't have to go to H5p and make an account. I don't have to build my content and manage how it's shared with others in the H5p world. I'm just authoring the content on the server, local to the server, and executing it local to the server, which winds up being just, I don't know, it's a little tidier and a little cleaner in my mind. Because sharing is cool, of course, don't get me wrong, but and yes, and in fact, Nicholas, we're going to take a look at video content authoring in the next session in more depth, but that's actually the best way to to do the video content activity in H5p, is to have content stored elsewhere and streamed in rather than uploading video files, because uploading video files is no fun. Well, I don't know. It's less fun than I'd hope. So let's take a pause there. Let's jump back into a quick moment of slides, and we'll talk really quickly about the embedding behaviors, because that was all about the activity feature and authoring content as activities. It gives you a direct authoring tool inside the platform, which is great. And you can store that content locally, right? You're not bringing it in from external sites and so on. But there's also the embed tool. This is the brand new approach. You've always been able to embed content from H5p or from somewhere else where you've got the content living, but it's a kind of a clumsy approach to doing things. You got to have a package somewhere. You got to put it up on H5p. You got to build it in a course and share that correctly so that it can be shared in other places. You know, that's a lot of overhead. In the 3.8 release, an H5p Embed Tool was added to the Atto editor. So it shows up where at the Atto editor, and you can embed H5p content in there. It's really designed thinking about like labels and lessons and pages and stuff like that. But you can put it in all kinds of crazy places, to be honest. I don't know that it's necessarily a great idea, but you can do it. So there you have it. What's different there is that it's not including an authoring package, right? So you don't build and author the content through this tool. You're just embedding content from somewhere. One approach is to author the activity and then download the activity through that reuse button. And now you have an H5p extension file that you can upload into whatever embedded space, right? So you build the content, you download the content in a save file, and then you upload that content into the H5p Embed Tool. Yeah, there's all sorts of weird stuff in there, but it's a really good way to plop H5p into a space to use it sort of as a formative assessment element, right? Spice something up on the page, make it a little more interesting, or to actually offer an opportunity for the learner to pause and assess or evaluate whether or not they actually learned the thing they were supposed to learn in that piece of text. As a consumer of content, I will also say that sometimes people do that in a way that, you know, they pick out like one word in 5 paragraphs of stuff that's been written, and you're like, that was not the most important word in those paragraphs, but okay, thanks for checking that I read that word. So it's not given that that always makes content better, but it's a great opportunity to make content better, right? Students consume a whole section of material. It feels a little bit drudgery. It feels a little bit like it's going on and on. It offers a great moment to pause and say, well, did you understand the point that I wanted you to understand about that, and move on. One of the tools that we'll take a look at is a summary, and I think it's designed with that use case in its mind. But in fact, all of the ones that we'll take a look at fit that need as well. The last thing I'll mention in here is there's a desktop authoring tool called Lumi. I've been experimenting with it. It seems to be working pretty good. It's free to use so far. It's from a German company or a German business, and it's as far as I can tell, it seems legit and good. You download the package, you install it, and it gives you an editor that you can run on your desktop. This works really great with that embed tool, right? Because now you can author H5p content on your desktop, save the file locally, and then when you go to embed it, just upload the file from your desktop into the embed spot, and poof, there you go. It's cool, it's fun, it looks exactly like the editing and authoring tool inside of Moodle. If we get a chance, we'll take a look at it a little bit later here as well. But I know we're burning through time like crazy, so got plenty of things to talk about. We've talked about how there's a lot of different types of content in there. We're going to focus on what I call the supporting content types today, which are questions and informational content items and the documentation tool. I just picked them at random. No, these are elements that you use on their own or uh, in building more complex content objects like the interactive video. The thing that makes the video interactive is that you add questions and information content objects on top of the video. So it leads, right? We'll take a look at those more complex tools next week. There are question types in here. This is actually not a complete list, but it's pretty close to complete list of all the different question types that are available. There's an awful lot of them. Some of them have very subtle overlaps between each other. Feel free to explore them a bit. There are loads and loads of them. Most of them are associated with things that we're kind of familiar with, right? Mark the words, multiple choice, fill in the blank, true, false, all that kind of stuff that we're sort of familiar with. Dictation is brand new. It allows you to say words that you're reading, and it tests to see that you're doing things correctly. I have not experimented with that one yet because it is pretty new, but it's kind of cool and interesting and seems like it would be fun for language classes. There are also audio tools in here. I think with the record RTC function being available, those audio tools are less valuable. And as I mentioned, sometimes the audio tools require specific browsers, specific extensions on browsers in order to work. So I'm not like huge fans of those ones. They had a moment where they were really meaningful, and then that moment passed, I think. So but that's just me. But these are question types. You can use these to build questions inside of content to provide checkpoints, to provide opportunities for a learner to pause and reflect on what they've learned or what they're supposed to have learned and evaluate for themselves in a non, grade impacting sort of moment, whether or not they got the point. You can also build quizzes with these in question sets, which is a compound activity. Again, we'll take a look at those ones next week. Let's talk about summary for a moment. Summary is a relatively new version of the question contents as well. Summary's intention is to be able to put together a series of statements that the user chooses the correct statement on. You can page multiple versions of those summaries into a sequence. So you can ask a question about these statements and then move to another set of statements and have them pick each time a correct statement out of the set of statements. And then it presents at the end of it the summary of the correct statements about what it was that they were supposed to have understood from the material they just consumed. It's a great summary element for a learning module or a learning experience. And that's why it's called summary. I think it's really cool. It's pretty neat. I'm always thinking of all kinds of places I want to put that tool now. So I'll give it its moment of hype. But now that we've rounded the top of the hour, let's think about a practice activity, sort of a thought experiment. Mike has a long page of content in this course, and is not sure that learners are really reading and understanding everything that's presented in that content. If you think about a page resource inside of a Moodle class, I don't really have a way to know whether or not that. I don't really have a way to check how much time you spent consuming that necessarily. I could certainly, with something like IntelliBoard, track how long you stared at it, but that doesn't really tell me what you got out of it. So Mike has an obvious question about that. How could I figure out, whether or not students are actually getting this? So this is just a bit of an experiment for you to try out on your own at some point. You can create a page resource, put some text in the page. A lot of times I just steal text from random places when I'm making examples. I gave a link in here to a page resource that's public on my demo site, for example. And then embed a question inside the page, any one of those questions in there. This just to practice, right? Just to think about an experiment, right? But it makes a flow, right? I present text, maybe some videos or images inside of that text. I'm feeling good about it, but I can always at the end of that text, or even in the middle, if it's really long in particular, insert an element that gives a student a checkpoint, right? To say, did you get the point of what we just covered? Did you get the point of what that was about? Particularly, I think of things like pages, but there are all kinds of other activities that this could apply to, and I'm sure that you can think of all of them on your own. But but just to lay it out, that would be a really powerful way to introduce an interactive element into a course. And we've got an assignment that kind of follows up on this idea for you to do and turn in inside the class. Another set of content types that I want to think about as basic content types is the information types. These are types that are not necessarily asking me to create a response as the user, but they give me an object to interact with or an element to interact with that presents information in a new way. They're informational rather than kind of assessing. Whether that assessment is formative or summative doesn't really matter for those question types. Questions are assessing, these are more presenting. But there are ways to present in a kind of new way. So there's an awful lot of these. Let's take a moment and take a look at some of them in action and think about how they work and behave. But there are ways to take what is maybe traditionally a long section of text and present that information in a new way. This, to me, is really more about what we talked about at the very beginning in the universal design for learning approach, where we have an opportunity to present content in an alternative format for the learner to consume in a different way to help them find the connections between the knowledge and where they are. And so it gives them that opportunity to approach the material in a different way, and hopefully get to it. There is a footnote on here about the Twitter feed activity, which is one of the information types. I always felt like it was one of those things that's a bit of a dubious value anyway, but it's not working. It's using an API set that Twitter deprecated, so it doesn't do its thing anyway. But there is an easy way to add Twitter feeds to classes, and if you're super hot on putting Twitter feeds in places, just let me know and I'll tell you how to do it. It's pretty easy, but I'm not going to burn any more time on it here. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this slide deck, and we're going to jump back to the class space and take a look at some of those elements one more time. So here is my course one more time, and as a just an example, let's take a look at building content this way. So I've got access to an awful lot of different types in here. So Accordion, if we want to learn the details of that, it creates expandable collapsible text spaces, right? So that when I'm looking at the text inside the space, there's collapsed menu of themes, and those themes can be opened up or expanded to show additional material. It's a pretty straightforward kind of tool. I think it's kind of nice to be able to add to lessons or books where I have a lot of text to cram into one page that I wanted to get in that one page of space. Rather than making it super scrolling or lots of clicks through lots of pages, if I want to present lots of material on one page, the Accordion allows me to put the material into paragraphs or themes that are collapsed expandable, and the students can move through that content. It's really great for presenting a set of definitions or explanations of content on a page. So that I can just embed that in there. It can be nice and tight and collapsed until the learner wants to open it up and take a look at the definition of the term, for example. So it's a really nice way to add informational content to the page. Yeah, accordions inside of labels is a great way to go for summaries. And yeah, schedules, that's a great idea, Josh. I like that. Being able to put in, what are you supposed to do on Monday? What are you supposed to do on Wednesday? What are you supposed to do on Friday or whatever? It gives you a really great way to create that information without that information overwhelming the display, right? Because it can collapse down nice and tight and neat. There are obviously ways that you could do that inside of a classroom using JavaScript and some custom CSS and doing all kinds of stuff. But that's architecting as opposed to clicking on a button, filling in some stuff, and moving on. I think of that example or some of these other examples, like definitions of terms, that kind of approach, as a great way of using that desktop tool where I can build that accordion text on my desktop like I'm writing a document, save the whole package, and upload it through that Addo toolbar to give me just a really easy way to put that content into a space. So we'll be sure to take a look at Lumi and get a little experience in there as well. There are loads of other informational types. Agamotto is one of the ones that I feel like it's quite legitimate to look at that and go, what are you talking about? but it's essentially a sequence of images, one after the other, that provide it sort of an interactive experience. It's really, frankly, it's like a timeline slide deck. You've all probably seen maps, I think, are the ones that get this a lot, where it's sort of over time, let's look at the changing political boundaries, or over time, let's take a look at the growth or the shrinking of the forests in this area. And this is a way to create that kind of an interactive experience pretty easily and cleanly in the system. It's exciting and fun for people who use a lot of visual elements, and they're going to find this to be pretty compelling and neat. The odds are there are folks that are teaching courses that have a lot of assets from outside sources that feel the same in their approach. And this is a great way for them to be able to have control and build those assets on their own. And feel good about themselves. Chart is another kind of fun one. Oops, well, let's add a chart, apparently. Sorry, that wasn't what I wanted to click on. I wanted to click on details. Chart is an easy way to build a chart, put it in the class, right? So rather than go out into Excel, build a chart, save the chart, export the chart, import the chart, I can just put the data directly into this tool and have it build the style of chart that I'm looking for, bar chart, pie chart, and so on. It's handy. It's an informational element, right? It's not too crazy or exciting, but it's also satisfying. Hotspots. There are find the hotspots where you're asking a question and saying, click on the thing on the picture that is this. But there are also hotspots that are just for display. Create an image with information hotspots on the image that you click on to expand for additional information. I use this in slide presentations all the time, right? I have an image on a course presentation, and then little pop-up elements that you can click on that will expand and give you more information. What's really cool with this is that it gives you a way to package layers of information that might be a long scroll on a page as overlays for an image instead. So I could have a map of a region with hotspots that give particular elements or information of interest about that. We could look at like a road cut. Being in California, I think about these things all the time, where you you drive down the road and you see the hillside that's been cut open, and you can see all the layers of folding and rock layers and sedimentation that's been uplifted from earthquakes and shearing. And so you could lay out that image and put hotspots all over it that show all of the different informational elements about the geology that you can see right there on the roadside. These are all ways to present information in kind of a new and a fresh approach for learners. And there's a lot of fun ways to approach that. Going to wrap that part up as well. There's tons of different pieces in there, to be honest. We could go forever, but but you really don't want to do that. So so I'll jump back to my little story here. And if we think about these information types again, column is a different way to lay out information. Collages are ways to put pictures together. Armados are ways to show sequences of images changing over time. Slider is a way to kind of just create a manual switch between two images, and juxtaposition is doing side-by-sides. So there's a lot of different tools in there. A lot of them are about graphical information or collapsible and expandable information. Hotspots and Accordion are about collapsible information approaches, and then a lot of graphic displays of information. Let's think about another experiment in our minds here. Bree has a course with an image that has a lot of supplementary information in a text form. Currently, it's just an image with paragraphs of text. Is there a way to use H5p to make that more interactive and feel a little more modern? Of course, I wouldn't ask if there wasn't. So if you want to experiment with this, grab an image file and some sample text. Really easy way to take an approach on that is to just find a Wikipedia page that has a picture and Wikipedia words. Since you're just building this as a test, it's, as an experiment, that's a great source to just steal from. And then delete or whatever. Or if you want to build something meaningful that's useful, find that source. But you can grab the picture, you can make it in a label or a page with some text in it, and then we can use the H5p tool, right? So you can author some H5p content and upload it in there. It could be a hotspot. You can make the bubbles on the image that have the text that go with that information and spice it up. But there are ways to approach any of this, lots of different ways, actually, to just create a slightly more interactive experience that gives students an opportunity to feel more engaged with the content. If nothing else, leave something to click on, and they're perhaps staring slightly longer and clicking slightly harder. So rather than just staring at a page and then moving on. But I think that's pretty self-explanatory stuff. Let's think about the documentation tool. It's my last one we're going to hit today. The documentation tool is a wizard. It's one of the options that is inside the H5p toolkit. It allows you to build a series of questions with response spaces for the student to be able to give an answer to that question, or a prompt, right, to develop their material. The documentation tool is responsive, so it works on all your stuff, right? But it's also a wizard that allows me to author responses, and then it can save that output as a document when we get to the end of this session inside the wizard. So for me, like an obvious extension for it is the assignment module, to think about adding it as the description for an assignment rather than giving a handout file that they fill in and turn back in. The wizard is more interactive, right? They go through the steps, it saves the question and their response in the document, then they can hand that document in at the end of the session of using the wizard. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, we're almost there. Really, we're going to leap into the homework assignment and then let you guys go. So it is a really great way to build a more interactive version of that kind of traditional handoff of, um, you know, fill in this Word doc or PDF and turn it back in, but get the same kind of results out of it, right? So giving you clear directives and instructions. You're going to fill in those instructions and give me the answers to those instructions, and then you're going to turn in the finished product. So I know that it's essentially you've filled in a form for me, but it feels a little more interactive and a little bit less old school, shall we say. So, so that was my commentary on those elements, and I just wanted to review the homework assignment piece that we're going to give out for you to do after this session's over. And the assignment is really, the intention is that you not spend lots of time struggling to come up with stuff to do this with, but instead to just walk through the steps so that you can feel familiar and comfortable with how to build these things. Nothing teaches better than doing. And so build a book, put some H5p elements into the book. What does the book have to be about? Doesn't really matter. Um, you may have a project that this aligns with, and you're like, that's awesome. I'm going to build a book that does the thing because that's exactly what I want to do. Or you could scrape some random content from the internet and put it on pages in a book. Um, whatever works for you works for me. But what I want you to do is reflect on the process of building the content and reflect on the process of putting the interactive elements inside that content. It's going to feel the same almost anywhere that you do these sort of embeds. So because the embed behavior is standardized in the text editors or standardized with the embed codes from H5p, you're going to lay it out. And so it's really a very, I mean, it could sound intimidating, but I want you to instead think about it as just a way to experiment with the process. And then this way, when faculty have questions about how to do these things, you've done it, you feel like you understand how to do it because you've successfully done it, you can explain it to them. You could make the book about explaining to somebody about how to make H5p content. So that's a great question. Aaron, the way that you add content from H5p is to use the embed code, the embed behavior. So let's take a quick look at that in just a sec. I will also land out that there's a homework assignment that's bonus. So I made two because, you know, sometimes people are overachievers. This one, Laura has an assignment where students download a PDF and fill it out and hand in a Word doc. How could you use H5p to do this differently? I think you already know the answer to this because we just did it. But let's walk through how we add H5p content to any HTML space, whether that's a module in terms of like a book or an activity like an assignment. Let's think about how to do that really quick. I'm gonna jump back. Hopefully you're enjoying all of my hopping between screen shares and slide shares, but looks like everything's working still, which is good. So the really easy way to answer this question is I actually did an experiment in here in the course. So I edited the summary for this activity and put in a find the words activity on the page. This activity, right, there's some words that are down on the bottom of the screen, and you can come in and find the words inside the text and highlight them like responsive. And sometimes I've noticed, so this has been a good experiment for me here, that you'll notice here, it's out of alignment. So maybe this isn't the best piece to use here, but if I refresh the page, it all snaps back into alignment. So how do we add that to it? It's really simple. I authored an H5p content package, downloaded it out of the site that I authored it on, and uploaded it into this site using the H5p Embed Tool. When I click on that embedder, I can browse a repository of content or upload content and then insert the H5p. I can also manage the options that are available. So I can show the copyright button or the copyright information on there. I can allow downloads or prevent downloads of the content that I'm putting in there. Typically, I strip that stuff out for embedding things in the middle of a page. You do what you got to do. But here's an H5p file that I Lumi, so it knows itself on my system, and that's the way that I uploaded that content directly into the system. So it's as simple as that to upload it and add it to the HTML space, and that's the way to put that in there. So you can author the content package in a tool like Lumi. You can author the content package as an H5p activity like this one here. So this quick example of content has a reuse button underneath it. And I can now download content as an H5p file and upload that content anywhere that I want to use it. Does that make sense? Yeah, you know what? Try a refresh on the highlight the words issue. It's really flaky. So my experiment with it has concluded it's kind of flaky. So, yeah. So you know what, Josh? I was going to say Firefox seemed to work more consistently for me. I haven't tried Edge, but I'm going to guess it probably has the same problems as Chrome. It, page refresh seems to pretty consistently get the problem solved, but yeah, fortunately, I don't really find a lot of use for find the words puzzles, but but I thought it would be fun, and then apparently it helped me determine that it's not my favorite. So there you go. Any other? Does anyone have any other questions about how to author the content and how to embed it? I think we've landed on how to do that pretty cleanly here, but hopefully, yeah, Lumi is free and it seems to work really nice. Actually, here, I'll do another screen share and I'll show you Lumi on my system. Oh, there it is. Cool. So I've got Lumi launched and I just did a share with it. And it just launches a little window that lets you either open an existing package. So you could open up a downloaded package and rearrange the content in it, or you could build your own. And look at that. It looks the same as it does inside of the Moodle platform for the authoring interface. It's really pretty straightforward, to be honest. And I haven't run into any issues with content not working. I did have one time where, on this site in particular, where I've uploaded H5p content and it triggered an update of the H5p libraries on the site because I was using newer libraries inside of Lumi than what the site had installed for that particular activity type. But overall, it's a really straightforward way to go, and I love using that Lumi thing. Awesome, Josh. Yeah, I love the multitasking there. So yeah, and if you build in Moodle, I always download and upload. You could probably browse through the system files browser and find the file in the system browser? That's a great question, Josh, and I've never tried that. Or you could use that embed tag from the object and embed it in a new place, which is what I used to do before the embed tool came out. The downside of using the embed tag is that I have had problems with people not having consistent permissions to access the original embed or the original object with the embed code. And I think it's sometimes it's a Moodle permissions layer getting in the way. And that's why downloading the package and uploading the package, or authoring the package in Lumi and uploading the package, winds up feeling more consistent to me, because the package is local to the embed. It's always referencing itself locally rather than trying to find the package somewhere else in the system, if that makes sense. But theoretically, it works great to be able to just use that embed tag instead of the reuse tag off of the H5p content. Look at that. This whole thing works just the same in Lumi as it does in the activity builder. I'm really been loving Lumi, to be honest. It's weird that working on the desktop app seems to be so easy. But what's great is that I don't have to download the file package first. I author the package and save it locally. What's cool here too is that if you build content in here, you also get a view window to preview the content inside the Lumi authoring tool. So you author the tool and you just flip back and forth between editing and looking at the content that you've edited. And it gives you kind of a really handy workflow. If I go over here, right, I can look at what I've authored there, and then I can preview what I authored and check it out. Yeah, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And you can still interact with the content in the preview, right? So you can test it out, make sure that it's working the way you think it works. And it actually gives you the full experience in the player. So, yeah. It does, Dan, and we'll take a look at that in the next session when we get into the video content, but it does allow the importing or direct authoring of closed captions as well. So it's pretty dope. But likewise, actually, if you're using, and I'm going to test this between now and then, but if you're using YouTube and you've got YouTube's captioning on, it should allow that captioning function to work from YouTube with the overlay. Yeah, the preview window is near instantaneous over here, which I really enjoy in that authoring. Rather than having to, right, you save and then exit and look at the tool and then go back in and edit the package and then save, and it just feels, it's a lot cleaner. It's all local, which is nice. Excellent. Yeah, and especially for those videos, actually, I think make a lot of difference. Thank you very much, everyone. I know we've rounded the corner on our hour-and-a-half session. I appreciate you joining me and listening to me babble away about stuff. Hopefully it was super useful. I'll share my slide deck with you in the class as well, so that you can borrow and steal that stuff. The tool is great. Take a crack at the assignments when you get a chance, just to reinforce that learning and that knowledge. Feel free to steal any of this stuff to help teach faculty what you want to share with them. I really appreciate your time, and I'll pay attention to the forum in the class, and feel free to ask me any questions that come up in there. Maybe I know an answer, maybe I don't. But yeah, it's all pretty good. Cool. Thank you very much, everyone. Oh yeah, and there we go, Josh, with the subtitles answer. It only detects if subtitles exist, if they're turned on by default. Oosh, okay, yeah, that's not so cool. Hopefully there'll be a way to fix that in the future. But yeah, so if you go to the video and you turn on closed captioning, on the video so that it's always on by default, then the captioning from YouTube will show up in the video in H5p. Okay, that makes sense. It's not the most elegant solution, but it'll work. All right, thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate you spending your morning with me, or your early afternoon, as the case may be. And I look forward to talking to you again next week. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.